I'm just saying, it's like you own
Look,
it.
if you're saying that there's a danger...
If you're in a parish of 1,
Yeah.
or in a parish of 1,000, or a parish of 100,000, but not in the parish that has anything in common with the Bible thumpers in my country who think that Jesus is very likely coming back in their lifetime because he never died, and he's going to judge the living and the dead, and there will be a resurrection and hellfire and all the rest. If that's not the game you're playing at all, own it.
Why are you all applauding about that? It's like, what do you mean own it? It's like, I already made my claim. It's like, I'm not playing a religious fundamentalist game, so what's all the applause about? So I don't understand that. And own it, it's like, I was as clear as I possibly could be when I delineated my answer to the question. People say, well, what do you mean by God?
Someone once asked you if Jesus was
resurrected. You want a 1-second answer?
But no.
Well, forget it, man.
Jordan, wait a minute, hold on.
I think we can actually...
This is a complicated
One
problem.
second. No, yeah. I don't want to end on a note of acrimony. But someone once asked you whether you thought Jesus was literally resurrected, and you said it would take me 40 hours to answer that question. Okay, that's the kind of thing I'm responding to here. You don't need to do that if you have a clear-cut answer to that question. And
I don't have a clear-cut answer to that question.
And if you don't, that connects with many other things that we still have to talk about.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
Because that...
It isn't obvious in the biblical account that Christ was literally resurrected. So it's not simple. This is not simple.
No, but if the question is, do you think he... Well, let's put it probabilistically. I mean, anything's possible. I'll tell you that it's possible that he was physically resurrected. I mean, it's even possible.
But wait a second, I didn't
with respect
say
to quantum
that he
mechanics.
Was.
The point is,
I said it would take me 40 hours to answer the question. I didn't say that he was.
Okay, how's this for an answer? Almost certainly not. What's wrong with that answer?
You want...
I think I know what's wrong with that answer.
It's a fine answer, and people have been giving that answer for a very long period of time, but the idea doesn't seem to go away.
Okay, but that's evidence of what exactly?
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, I can tell you one thing it's an evidence of. There's a deep idea.
Let this be the doorway to our next 3-hour conversation.
Sure.
So we have 10 minutes left.
Okay. Well then, let's answer that question in 10 minutes.
So wait, I want you to trust me here. You for whatever reason decided I should moderate, so I want you to trust me. For one thing,
you have been doing yeoman's work.
Sam, I really would like to answer that question. But I'm trying to figure out. People seem to think that I'm trying to evade the question. It's like, I'm not evading the question, I'm trying to figure it out. People have been arguing about this for 2,000 years. It's like, it's not simple.
But that's a symptom of the effect of religious dogmatism for 2,000 years.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's partly a symptom of that. It's also partly a symptom of the idea.
The resurrection of Jesus is clearly an important question, but you've raised a much bigger and more pressing question for the audience, which is whether or not God cares whether they masturbate. So I actually think if we pursue that answer, that we will actually wrap this up in a way that...
You want to end this on masturbation?
I think we owe it to them, too.
Okay.
So, give me a little leash.
The floor is yours.
Okay, great. How did I end up here? All right. So here's the question. Let's just figure out if we can determine why God might care if you masturbate, right? So let's suppose that we have a story, a heuristic of some kind that stands in for something. And the story is God is watching. He sees you always. He doesn't want you masturbating, so don't you dare. What happens?
What happens?
Yeah.
Well, it's a rather ineffectual
You sure?
idea. Yeah. Well, I mean,
You don't think that story prevented lots of people from masturbating?
Well, no, but I think the reality was that you had people masturbating and feeling terrible about it, and you had a whole layer of sexual neurosis that got grafted onto human psychology unnecessarily.
Okay,
I mean,
so-
Christianity has a certain typology of sexual hang-uppery, which the tantrics don't have.
So if I understand you correctly, you are agreeing that a certain number of people will have masturbated.
Some of them joined the priesthood and raped little boys. I mean, that's all
let's
of a
not
piece.
go there.
Yeah.
Let's stick with the topic. So a certain number of people will have masturbated. They will have thought.
Honestly, it's the same topic. I mean, the taboos around masturbation, the taboos around sexuality prior to marriage, the taboo around divorce, all of the taboo around out-of-wedlock birth, the ideal of celibacy in the priesthood, all of that is just a diabolical machine of needless sexual conflict and misery.
Hold on.
But yes, okay.
You have to take diabolical out of there.
How's the whole flood of pornography thing working out for you?
I will grant you that there is some interpretation that takes supernatural principles and magic and otherworldliness out of the equation here that gets you some wisdom in the heuristic. Yes, if you're masturbating all the time, you're not satisfying your monogamous relationship with your wife or husband.
We don't even need to go there.
You're not procreating, and we want children.
Let's just agree that a certain amount of masturbation was prevented by that story, which made people fear the consequence of them engaging in it, which would result in, I'm pretty sure, less masturbation, which means that in seeking a release, which we are physiologically programmed to seek, one might end up looking in a more urgent fashion for a mate.
Right. Are we going to enforce monogamy? Is that
no. So look, I'm trying to take you somewhere. I think there is a way that we can rescue some important part of what both of you are saying that can now be reconciled, and then there's a bitter pill for each of you. I mean, that's just the way this looks to me. So if we can agree that this makes sense actually as a fitness-enhancing adaptation, that this story would result in people behaving in a way that might result in them marrying early, might result in them reproducing earlier than they would otherwise, right? Then we can understand it as mechanistic, and we can understand what you said, that, maybe God would care about whether or not people masturbate because God is a metaphor for some set of stories that gets you to behave in an adaptive fashion. But the point for you then would be that Sam is arguing, with reason, we can decide whether or not to employ this story at this moment, whether it's a good idea for us to urgently reproduce as quickly as possible, which, for example, increases the size of the population of the planet, whereas delaying reproduction keeps the rate of population growth down, and might be a better choice for a moment in history when we have 7.5 billion people on the planet. So, in some sense, what I think I see is the religious story itself makes some kind of sense if you adhere to it in a manner that you are obligated and have no tools with which to question it. Then you will miss the fact that at this moment you might want to throw that story out.
The problem is it doesn't make sense, and this is a problem with these heuristics in general. It doesn't make sense for the right reason, and that's why it's not a reliable guide given other changes in the world. But with everything changing, you want to be making sense for the right reason. You don't want it so useful fictions have to be retired at a certain point. Useful truths stay true. I mean, because they're based on your engagement with reality. And so to take your point about pornography, which I think is totally valid, you could have a completely rational conversation in terms of human psychology and sociology and what you want society to look like about the corrosive nature of pornography, right? You don't have to be a Victorian prude to worry that there might be something wrong with the infinite availability of pornography to 13-year-olds and above, right? I mean, that's I don't know what generation of human beings we're raising in the current environment. It's quite worrisome, actually. But again, you don't have to invoke mythology to do that. And I would say the temptation to invoke mythology, to say, well, you actually,
So how do you do it?
Poseidon really gets pissed off when you masturbate.
How do you do it? How do you do it?
We
don't have a mechanism. We have no
mechanism
for controlling
that. Talk about the
at
effects
moment.
on human relationships and your own mind and your own intention and the way you view other people.
Sam,
and
that
notions
barely
of
works
beauty.
for sex ed. It barely works for condom education.
What was
It
that?
barely works. Like those sorts of educational interventions to stop that kind of fundamental behavior have very little effect.
Well,
People aren't nearly as amenable to behavioral changes as a consequence of rational educational interventions as you might hope. I mean, and that's part and parcel of very broad clinical literature.
They're not as amenable to dogmatic intrusions either. I mean,
they are, and that might be a problem. And there are problems with that.
Well, no, because they're, again, this is just.
Like the terror of God in that situation.
All going in. The problem is that even if you could make the case that a dogmatic attachment to one or another religion was better, all things considered, than being secular, truly secular and truly rational, right? It's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to every next thing we find out. I mean, that's why it's like you could have said, if you go back, 200 years before the germ theory of disease, you could have said, well, all of these dietary taboos and taboos around, hand washing and foot washing, it's actually very wise. The wisdom of the germ theory of disease was sort of built into our scripture, and people were there was a kind of differential level of survival based on those who really adhered to these practices and those who didn't. Okay, but it's blind to the actual variables. Like there's nothing special about shellfish necessarily, or there's nothing special about pork necessarily, or whatever the example is. And once you get the actual variables in hand, then the whole edifice comes crashing down, and then you really just want to understand the variables that work.
Look, I don't know if the whole edifice comes crashing down, and it isn't clear to me that you want to claim that, because one of the things you did say in the moral landscape, and I think this is associated with your interest in spirituality, is that there is some baby mixed in with the bathwater. And the question is, how do we distill that out?
Yeah.
And the objections that you're raising are the objections that are, look how difficult it is to do the distillation. It's like, yeah, absolutely, man. And it's not like I'm a foe of the Enlightenment. I think you Enlightenment types, and I put Pinker in the same camp, radically overestimate the degree to that was a casus sui. It's like everyone was barbaric and superstitious until 1750, and some miracle occurred, and now we all became enlightened. Like there was a lengthy developmental history
clearly
of
we
that.
all haven't. I mean, this is hence our complaining about the problem. And most of the world hasn't had the Enlightenment yet.
True.
On some level.
Look, I'm no foe to the Enlightenment, but I think that it had a lengthy developmental history that is radically underplayed by the people who ground it purely in rationality.
It's clearly still developing. My point is, we should be able to agree that having a worldview guided by a continuous, honest engagement with reality, insofar as we can apprehend it, is better than having a worldview solidified or anchored to unchanging ideas that were born of people who had none of our present tools, none of our present insights into anything.
Well, it depends on the principles. It depends on the principles. Like I would say, there are situations where that clearly applies, but I think there are broad principles. And again, we should probably stop with this, I think.
Yep, we're about there.
Because I'm starting to get tired. I'm sure everyone else in here is starting to get tired. Well, I'm starting to get tired anyways. And I mean, there are principles, there are higher order principles of the sort that I described that you also appear to rely on in the moral landscape, the idea of these profound moral intuitions.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm after, is what are these profound moral intuitions and what is their source? And like, I'm also perfectly willing to make the claim, and have in fact in detail, that these moral intuitions, see, this is a place where we differ a little bit. It's like, and maybe we can go here tomorrow night. See, it seems to me that your argument is the facts are laying out there and you can extract out value from them, and we already described why you want to do that, because you want to at least not move into the nihilistic direction, and you want to ground them in some sort of reality. It's like, fair enough. But the thing is that the facts, as they are, have been around for a very, 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 very long time, right? Let's say 3.5 billion years, the entire expanse of life. And it's the operation of those facts on life that has produced the a priori, implicit, interpretive structures that guide our interaction with the facts. And those a priori implicit structures that have emerged out of this evolutionary course have a structure that mediates between us and the facts that cannot be derived from the facts at hand. And so then the question is, what is that structure? And it's in both of our interests to get that right, because you use that as the source of moral intuition. It's like, right, agreed, that's the source of moral intuition. So,
well, clearly we need to table this for tomorrow night, but that's a good...
Guys, I'm just going to interrupt you. You guys, let's give Jordan Peterson, Sam Harrison, Brett Weinstein a huge hand. Let's go.
Thank you.